Okay, good morning everybody, or maybe good afternoon by now. Welcome everybody to Brownback Lunch. We have birthday cards going around today for Elaine Edwards and Sarah Jones, and a sympathy card for Lyle Sheepers, who almost always was sitting right over there, and they're at his services right now. So,
excuse me, and for Joanne.
Oh, sympathy card going around for Joanne. Thank you. You're right, for Joanne. We did Lyle's last time, but they're missing today, and that makes me very, very sad. So, as you know, we're all working really hard on our muster on the Maquoketa, which is our big fundraiser for the year. We need lots of help. So we hope that everybody will help us and support that. So far, I just want to give you a little rundown of what we've done so far. We've been in 4 parades with our float. Jack Willie was in charge of our float, did a wonderful job. We were in the Preston Parade, the Bellevue Parade, the Wyoming Parade, and of course the Maquoketa Fair Parade. We had trivia last Thursday night, that Alice and Dennis Manns ran. They did a beautiful job. It was a fun thing. We had a great time, and I think everybody learned a lot. It was really good. We do not have a total on how much we made from Maquoketa Brewing that has been so wonderful to let us be their sponsor for the whole month of July. But we do know that at trivia night we made $336 playing trivia, and we made $143 on our bake sale. So thank you for everybody who either baked for us or bought things. So you know, we had a big event at Bender's in Bellevue Friday and Saturday. They also were very, very good to us. John Hoff was there. He grilled for 2 whole days. He grilled for us. Karen and Kevin Brown were there, Cleta Deppie and David Kunzweiler. They were the main people there selling things and selling hot dogs or selling brats, burgers, and pork chop sandwiches that were delicious. We also don't have a count from vendors yet about what this raised for the Historical Society and for the muster, but we do know that in tips alone, we made $305 just in tips. So that was a worthwhile event. So thank you to the Browns, and especially to John Hoff, who cooked for 2 days.
Could you do a reminder then, anybody to help with all those things you just mentioned, that they get that on the volunteer sheet?
Whoa, good idea. Sue Mayberry does such a great job of keeping track of our volunteer hours, something we've never been able to do successfully until she took over. She needs to know when you're volunteering for all these wonderful things for the muster, whether you're baking for us, whether you're selling brats at vendors on the parade, no matter what you're doing, please see that your volunteer hours get written down and turned in. There's clipboards, different places. You can email them to Sue, however you want to do that, but please see that they get turned in. It is a very, very important to the Historical Society that happens.
And the fair last week.
Absolutely, thank you. For the fair, we had wonderful fair volunteers. We're grateful to Dan Davidson. He makes it possible for everybody to go through the museum and the machine sheds without having to pay admission. So it's free all during the fair for anybody who wants to go through. Dan sees that it's free. And we had, just on Sunday morning, we had 71 people go through the machine shed and kept track. Sunday afternoon, we had 163 people go through the machine shed. So all that is so important, and we appreciate everybody that helps us out. Just so you know, there are rocks available. Here, there, and everywhere, I'm told, there are going to be rocks that advertise, painted rocks, okay, that advertise the muster. You'll find them out and about, here, there, and everywhere. Pick up your rock, turn it over, it'll tell you the where and the when, and bring that with you to the muster, and you get $1 off your admission. So rocks are getting out there, so start looking for rocks. And then lastly, for the muster, tickets are available for the dinner and the ball. So we're going at the supper and the ball, excuse me. That is on Saturday night in Pearson Hall. It is part of the muster activities, the reenactment activities. So we have tickets available. They're $25. That includes a wonderful meal in Pearson and the entertainment afterwards. The Black Velvet Band is donating their time to come and play for us. That is a wonderful thing. And then intermission, Dan Holm has a wonderful program lined up of, we have Jenny Lind, who is going to be there performing. What else?
Stephen Foster.
Stephen Foster, that just never comes into my brain. Stephen Foster will be there. So it's just gonna be a wonderful, fun, entertaining evening to come and support the muster. So hope that you'll get your tickets. We have to have all of our tickets sold 2 weeks ahead of time because we have to have that number to the caterer for the dinner that night. So don't wait until the last minute to get your tickets. They will be all gone. Diane?
For the supper that night, is that dress up or costume or?
Good question. So we would love, of course, and the reenactors would love for everybody to come in Civil War kind of something or other, but you don't need to. Just come. I think what they don't want is they don't want a big sweatshirt that says University of Iowa on it that we wouldn't have had during the Civil War or something like that. But just, I mean, they wore cotton and they wore plain, you know, so if you don't want to dress up, it just at least, you know, a plain white cotton blouse, shirt, whatever. Just get as close as you can. And if you don't even want to do that, just come. We just want you to come. It's going to be a wonderful supper. There's going to be baked chicken and pork loin, potatoes, green beans. It'll be a wonderful meal. And we know great entertainment. And then the muster itself for everybody will be Saturday and Sunday. Friday, and I think this is very important that people know that the Historical Society is doing this. Friday is Living History Day. We have, we believe, 270 8th graders from around the county being bussed in to learn hands-on about the Civil War. And that's really a neat thing. So during the day, Friday, it will be for students only. Friday night, there'll be an evening with General Grant in the museum. We have a wonderful first-person impersonator that will be doing that. So just a lot of wonderful things going on that whole weekend. So please come and support us. It's our fundraiser for the rest of the year. Very important to keeping our doors open and our bills paid. So if you can help us out, like you have been helping us out, please do that. Okay, next week. Yes?
Can they buy tickets today?
They can buy tickets for the dinner today. Yep.
See you afterwards?
Yep. Have lots of tickets.
No,
Okay.
you don't have a lot of them. You have a limited supply, so they need to get them.
Well, that's true. That's true. Don't wait until this time. Don't wait until the last minute because we have to think. We have to know ahead of time. So lots and lots of things going on. Something for everybody to do who's willing to volunteer. Next week, Brown Bag Lunch is going to be Sue Mayberry. Where are you, Sue? She's here. Okay. Sue, do you want to say something? Or
So, $18.99.
$18.99.
I can't think of the first name now, but the last name is Nig, and he died in the Cyclops.
Maybe Frank did, I think?
I talked about all the families, so now I
Okay,
forgot.
so it'll be about the Nig family from Macokota. He graduated in the class of 1899. That's the same class that Matthew Luckish was in. We had brilliant, outstanding people that graduated from our schools early on. And so it's going to be a wonderful program next week. This week, we have a really fun program by Philip Owen. He comes from Monticello. We so appreciate him coming. He's going to talk about, as you know, old radio programs, old TV programs, and some of the businesses that are around back then to keep those things going. Right? So, without further ado, Phil Owen.
Thank you. Always glad to be back among the home folk.
Okay, be sure and talk into the mic.
Thank you. I said it's always good to be back among the home folk. I see if I can hang on this close enough to.
Okay, or you can keep it in there and move it around.
Well, I wonder a little bit.
Whatever works.
I got to stick to my telephone. It'd be hard enough as it is staying on track. But I sign on here. I sound like a radio announcer, but not really. It's going to be about radio. In fact, I got an artifact here that is a radio. It's got a compass, get lost, it's got a crank,
Gotta talk into the mic.
got a solar, that's why I say over here, got a solar cell on the top of it. It's got a light in your tent. But you didn't have that on your radio. Bet you didn't have that on your radio. We didn't have that. A console radio set in the living room. Today I'll be sharing some national, but mostly local history, radio entertainment, radio businesses, so a little bit of TV. I dedicate this journey down the memory lane, as I like to say, as a tribute, actually, to many who were part of that business culture, especially to my Uncle Harold Owen. He set me on a path into electronics that had a few sidetracks, which I'll talk about, but I found my way back, and that worked out very well. I set my career in motion. I hear your local KMAQ has got a new owner now. Still got, so I think part of KMCH operation up by Manchester. Don't let anybody tell you that TV is going to drive radio off there. It's just part of competition. It seemed like radio is just much easier to listen to and stay tuned in than TV. You got to kind of concentrate. Radio gives you imagination. Do you ever remember what some of those old programs were like? TV, I forget most of them because you're so overloaded. I got that long time ago with that console radio. That was the only furniture. We didn't have much technology at home. We had a radio. How many remember that large radio? Anybody remember a battery radio? Yeah. I guess you can still get this battery, obviously. I'll share something with you. It was a man-dominated world in business, but women made the decisions. I worked in homes, basements, laundry rooms. They made the decisions of what went in the house. Okay. Now the guy said he thought he had a vote. Well, he did, but it was the women who said, "I like that console the best for a TV." He said, "Well, I like the picture better on the other one. I don't care. I like this console. It's more this better my furniture." So the women had a big part. We'll share some artifacts later about some other memories that come to life. But as a farm kid, how many were farm kids? Well, that's my audience here. Okay, well, there's sprinkling. Not as isolated today, but it is more isolated in some ways than you got a neighbor next door you can run to. Farms are getting further apart. It was isolated out in the Caves Road. But we didn't feel isolated. I got my brother here with me today, Gerald. You probably know him. He knows where his farm is in Jackson County. And my son Jeff on a farm, a family farm on my wife's side. That's out by Monticello. They're somewhat isolated. You can't just walk next door and get something. But I feel isolated, and I thought, boredom? No, not really. Dad always had something to do, and if he didn't, we found something to do. We made it up. Tried all kinds of crazy things. I survived, okay, listening to Owen Ranger, Hi-O Silver, and all. Your imagination came to life. You heard, I don't do a very good rendition of hoof beats, but there was hoof beats and music and wind and fights and shots and I don't know what all. And you had to picture all that. There was no picture there. It wasn't moving and it wasn't in color. What you had to be up here. And I maintain today that skill set was not being developed like it was as just part of the culture at that time. It was just there. And you had it. Oh yes, the neighbors had a TV. And I started imagining, oh, it'd be nice to have one in the living room. You could sit there and watch wrestling. But Gerald and I, maybe younger brother, our neighbor, John Gladys Larkey, up the road, who later came back into the world of TV. And they bought OK Tire. Tire and TV. They were my neighbors. If they didn't have any kids, they invited us up the road, mostly wintertime. And and gave us all kinds of food, and we sat there in a smoky atmosphere, full of smoke, watching Saturday Night Wrestling. And you didn't have to imagine that because you could see it. Somehow it was nice, but we weren't realizing what we were losing, I think, at the time. I was sitting there later, starting to, well, how on earth does do those waves travel through the air and so far, and then they come through a vacuum tube where there is no air? That's about the limit of my physics at the time. How does that work? And, oh, you just accept it. Uncle Harold, bless his heart, he was in the Navy. He was a farm kid also, we'll talk a little bit about. And true fact is, he was in country school like Gerald and I, and I guess a lot of you. He never went to high school because 8th grade, he stayed home and helped and worked on the farm and helped the neighbors and whatever. But he set my path moving forward. And a career that, a career path today sure does not involve repairing radios and televisions. I mean, you just don't repair them anymore. I got a gentleman in Monticello who was the same age as Mo, about, well, he's 10 or 15 years younger than Uncle Harold, but he had a radio business and it's just kind of, he didn't know what to do with it. You got everything in there yet. So things do change. Take a few minutes now, let's share some of the programs. Who remembers a soap opera radio? Yeah, tell us about it. Can you remember?
Well, I remember his name, Stella Dallas.
Stella, I remember the names. I was the oldest. Mom didn't have any girls, eventually she had 4 boys. But I was in the house quite often in the wintertime. I was too small to be outside doing much. And she'd put me busy doing something, and you'd be hearing Stella Dallas. Never met the lady, I don't think anybody did. Our Gale Sunday. Can a young woman from a mining town in Colorado find happiness? I kind of remember some of that. And there was a music up and down, like, okay, can she find it? Well, it's a long, long story. She wound up marrying some rich guy and moving way to the other end of the country, as I recall. That stuff sticks with you. Why, I don't know, because I don't remember the Lone Ranger stories either, but it was a culture at the time, kind of like computers were a few years ago, kind of like, I don't know, what's the fad nowadays, the latest tech stuff? I lost track. Well, that's passe. But yeah, you're right. It's what are there, about 16 releases now on the iPhone, something like that. Everybody got to have the latest one. What does it do that's different? Not a whole lot. Anyway, but RCA, what does that stand for?
Radio Corporation of America.
Yeah, they're still, the name is still there. In fact, they were competing with Collins, and we'll get into that story later, but they were one of our competitors. They were at one time a government monopoly, more or less, and then the government said, no, we don't want to monopolize this radio. We want to get as many people involved as we can. So what they did, they collected Marconi. Anybody remember him in history? He was more than telephone or telegraph. But he had a lot of patents. And there were some other patents around that early TV was in the late 1930s. It was proven, but the government was trying to inspire some other up-and-coming companies. And then Edison also had a lot of patents. You know, Thomas Edison, I don't think he was a farm kid, but he was a dropout of school. In fact, he dropped out. He went to 12 weeks of formal school. 12 weeks. Now, there's other people with that same story, supposedly, but he was labeled addled, and that means hyperactive at the time. He asked questions, drove his teacher nuts. And his teacher talked to his mother and made some derogatory statements, and his mother got mad and took him out of school. He never went back. He just kept asking questions. She taught him to read, and he was off to read. He had 1,093 patents by the time Edison died. And those patents became the foundation basically of a lot of industries. But RCA and Marconi's leftover patents picked up all those through government decision. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take this and we're going to put them in a pool. And they're going to be available for use, for limited use. And I forget, must have been a few restrictions. I don't remember what they were, but the companies they included were Westinghouse, still in business, American Telegraph, AT&T. Are they still a business by themselves, or did they get blended out? I think they got blended with somebody. Western Electric, they're kind of the basis of the telephone. United Fruit Company was one of these. Now, where on earth did a fruit company get involved with a radio monopoly? Well, they had a huge network in Central and South America, and they relied on radio for communication with their businesses, but they also had a lot of employees, and for some reason they became part of this early group. United Fruit eventually became Chiquita Banana. Okay, so there's some strange people involved here. The cross-license agreements, it was a solution to the government for radio monopoly. My path into electronics is a little bit devious, but it started with that. I wonder how that signals get in and out, and I really love radio. I like radio. The TV is really great. Emmeline had a dial telephone. I think I talked about that. The switchboard system was all automated. 1948. It was all relay, no transistors. And the relays would click away, you'd go in there, and I'd watch those things. How on earth does that work? It doesn't take a whole lot of electronics to understand how a relay works. Now that I understand it, but Harold and kind of sparked my imagination, but so did Morris Round. I don't know, Gerald, if you remember that name or not. He was older, quite a bit older than we were. He'd been in Korea, and he gained some experience with telephone switching, and he was the guy that helped put it in and keep it going. And he gave me his copy, big thick book, Amateur Radio Handbook League schematics and basic information about electronics. And I spent a little time, but eventually I got kind of excited about that. Now, I'm going to build me a shortwave receiver schematic in there. So Uncle Harold, bless his soul, had a whole bunch of leftover old outdated, he dumped them right in our driveway up at the caves. I came home one night, there's this pile, oh my gosh, like a kid in a candy shop. I dug through it, I found, there's car radios, there was every kind imaginable. I said, well, there's got to be one in here somewhere that kind of works. I wanted one for the barn, something to listen to when I'm milking cows. By swapping tubes around, which you could look inside and see if the tubes were shining, glowing, and if they all were, well, probably another problem. You put that one aside, saying, okay, there's probably some good tubes in there. You find another one that's got one tube that's not lit. Oh, okay, you go to the junk pile. So by swapping stuff around, real technical, I got one working. I got another one working, and I sold it to a neighbor. I thought, boy, this could be something. So I was hooked. And it went on from there, but I kind of jump around here, even though I got a script, but in 1954, I don't know the details, but either Harold mentioned it or Dad. Harold was my dad's older brother. Harold, one of them said, he needs some help. Would you like to come to Macoka to live in the basement and then work in Harold's shop and go to school, finish your junior and senior year? I said, well, hey, yeah, just getting off the farm's a good plan. I think he'd already sold the cows, but he still had pigs, and I don't know. It's all right, but Dad knew it wasn't my passion. He told me, in fact, I just know that you probably got another path. So whether he and Harold cooked that, I don't remember. I know I did not make the initiative to ask if I could come work there. I think I can say that. But I got in there, and boy, Harold was a good mentor. He was patient. And he had learned the same way I was learning. He didn't have a whole lot of theory. He went off to school in Chicago. But he started, I think, as a very young man, on a correspondence course, coin radio. If you looked in the electronic magazine, there were at least 3 or 4 schools you get correspondence course. He signed up, I think, shortly after they lived in Clay Mills, or maybe his area. I remember Mom mentioned in her diary that he went to Chicago to go to school. Well, that was basic wiring, and it wasn't much radio. But later, he came back. He borrowed $400. That's a lot of money to go to Chicago to finish school with the coin. He borrowed it from Ed McCarran. Anybody remember that name? Lived out east somewhere, Dark Hollow. I don't know. Ed McCarran had a barn dance Saturday night. I remember that. Well, I don't remember it, but Mom had it in her diary. Anyway, he borrowed that much money from Ed McCarran and went in. He came home and worked for Ed for 1 year. Board and room, no pay. Well, maybe incidental money. His goal was to get that $400 paid off. But then he opened business with, I don't know if he started with a friend, Pete Rockroar or not, but I know shortly thereafter he and Pete had a business. And this was before World War II. They were wiring rural farms. That meant the line was coming in. I could think kind of like now the internet comes into the same company, Anamosa, Rural Electric, is laying new internet lines out past Jeff's farm. They're putting in a fiber, not as big as well, it goes in a tube like that. But that's what was happening back in the 1930s. The REA, Rural Electrification Agency Association, was working with local co-ops to get a client pool and loan money or co-sign, and they would bring the line out to the farm, put in the pole, put up a transformer, and put a box on the pole. And after that, the landowner was on their own. Well, most farmers aren't going to go do much of that. So Harold and Pete would go to the farm, and they had the basic skills, not to get electrocuted, and they would wire the buildings. Okay, a light bulb was a pretty important deal. And a timer in the chicken house. Go in the barn and put a few lights. In the wintertime, you weren't done with chores when it was dark. And in the house, they would go, and Harold told this story. He and Pete were very compatible, somewhat different personalities. Harold was like me, a little impulsive, just wanted to get it done. Pete was, well, let's think about this, let's stop and think about it. I knew them both. And Harold said, yeah, Pete and I would go. And I kind of knew in my mind what we were going to do. At least I thought I did. And Pete, no, wait a minute, let's stop and think about it. So they'd walk through all the buildings, and Pete'd have a sketch or a pencil and paper, and Harold was getting antsy. Let's get drilling some holes. Let's make something happen here. And they would know what they were going to do. And by the time they got started, Harold went real quick because we knew what we were going to do. They would wire the house so that Mom had a plug for the refrigerator and electric iron if she had one. That'd be my mother. She got married. That was two-piece technology she had. Electric iron. You have to heat the old thing on the stove. And a refrigerator. She was just seventh heaven. And a light bulb, at least one in every room, and one outlet. And that was the extent of the technology back then. World War II came along shortly after they were in business. Meanwhile, Harold actually started a radio shop also in parallel with his wiring up the building. Above Penrose Hall, a Penrose store. Where was Penrose Dance Hall? That was upstairs, I guess, wasn't it? You're where'd my historian go, Bonnie? Mom always talked about they went to Penrose Dance. I just assumed it was upstairs. Harold had a radio shop upstairs in his wiring business, but when the war came along, he and Delbert, his next oldest brother, both signed up for World War II. And by the time The story goes, two other brothers were in there, and Harold was sent to radar school, radio and radar school. Boy, that was a new technology at the time. Nobody knew anything about it. Take a farm kid, country school, no high school. And they said, well, you got some electrical background. You went to Coin, you must know something. They sent him off to Texas A&M, which is an engineering school, to learn the theory of radar. Well, it turns out he was really enjoying it, but man, oh man, 8th grade math just didn't quite cut what they were trying to do. It was mostly practical, but he got the measles and eyesight, and he was out of class long enough. He fell behind and they mustered him out. He closed his business, so did his brother closed at Georgia. They both closed their business to join up. Harold was back out, but he was still eligible for draft if they decided they needed him. He's a little older. But I think his option was go to work as a civil service inspector, working for the government, working on government contracts on, for companies that were building electronic equipment. Okay, because he had that background. He went Ohio and Michigan, I think, and moved around a bit. And then his other two brothers had enlisted, so he was feeling, I don't know, guilty, or I don't know what I never talked to him. He re-enlisted. And the Navy this time, first time was the Army Air Force, this time was in the Navy, and they sent him back to radar school. This time it was more the practical, hands-on, which was his thing. He could do that. Didn't have a lot. He had some math, but nothing theoretical. They weren't trying to make an engineer out of him. He was trying to get somebody that could repair and install the equipment. And he spent a little time at Iowa State, he said. I don't know just how long. But he wound up in Hawaii. Okay. I don't know the details of it, but it was sure duty on a shop. But he spent time on the ships out, new ships that come out, maybe older ones. Anyway, the new radar equipment was coming in and it had to be installed. Well, he installed things. He and Pete installed wiring in chicken houses. They could certainly learn how to do that. Well, he did. It was a hands-on watch, which he'll show you. It was more practical. He told about the radar systems, and now the controls were down in the control room, kind of like an antenna rotor. Remember the old rotors on the TVs? Well, it's just the same way. We had the big antennas up there, and we had a control down. So it was simple wiring. It wasn't high-tech. Then he did a lot of bench work also, stuff that would come in broken. I guess my script here I need to get back to a little bit to be sure I cover the bases. Harold came back home then and reopened his radio business upstairs in Penrose. Eventually, I don't know if he and Pete stayed. I think they might have been still doing some wiring after the war was over. But his radio business took off, and wasn't too long, 1948, Uncle Harold, one of the first TVs, if not the first TV in Jackson County, or Macokota maybe, they were coming in pretty fast, so he didn't know for sure he had the first one. But he established pretty good business doing that. In fact, it covered a lot of this Jackson County. I remember him working all day, not super, frantic, just steady. And then after we'd eat at night, he'd be down maybe 6 o'clock. He'd load up his tool caddy, some tools, stick in the station wagon, and head out on service calls. Winter, summer, hot, cold, pretty much didn't matter. I mean, he went from Lost Nation, Delmer, Welton, Bernard, Springbrook, Monmouth, Wyoming, Canton. I mean, he just went wherever their work was. Some of those people had radios that they had brought in, so they knew it was in. You didn't make a service call for a pair of radio, it was a TV. So his radio connection plus the experience and the customers he had from wiring the buildings gave him a ready-made customer base. It was the, I call it OJT, on-the-job training. I have a new acronym. I call it OLDL. Observe, learn, do. Observe, listen, do, and learn. Listen while I show you what you need to do. You do it while I'm watching, and then I'm going to come back. I'm not going to stand around too much and what. You're going to tell me what you've learned and problems you have. It's OLDL. It's a process we use today. How many of you, when you went to school, had a cell phone? Like me. How many of you went to school and knew anything about a computer? How many of you know those things today? I mean, we kind of all know them. We kind of all use them. We know not too much mystery. So we're in that same school. OLD, we observe, we listen, and then we do it. Maybe the first time you, like me, the first time you used a computer at work, I closed my office door. I guess I didn't want observing, and maybe I didn't want to hear anybody hear the frustration. But we learn by doing, and that was how Harold was able to perfect that. His customers, well, all customers, any customer, they trust whoever's working on their car, their body, their family, their house, to not mess it up, make a bad problem worse, break something. They trusted us, Harold and myself, mostly Harold. I guess they figured if I messed something up, Harold would make it good. But we would crawl around on the roof, maybe drill holes, maybe run the cable around the outside, maybe drill a hole through the wall, maybe just open the window and stick the lead in there. But you get in the basement and install washers and dryers. Of course, you had to do some plumbing, learn some of that. Meanwhile, the other business community in Macokota was doing the same thing. He had a friend, Alvin Kelchner. Kelchner Radio and TV, I think it was on East Platte, if I remember right.
East Platte.
Yeah, okay. They were acquaintances before they went into service, and they met each other while they were in school, and they used to take the same training, radar. But there was competition between others. There was Kelchner, Franzen, I think he just TV repairs. Taylor, I remember a Taylor. I don't know he was very active, but he moved to Lisbon eventually. I knew him down there. Jim Taylor, I think was his name. Then there was, I can say, OK Tire Store. That would be Darrell and Gary Hicks. I'll give you a little bit about the background of the business itself. I got involved with all aspects of the business. I have no secrets. Harold tried to do it all, but bookkeeping, at the end of the week, we'd wrap up everything that was records that came in, adding machine tape. I don't know what other records he had. I don't exactly remember. Sales tickets, and a record of the, I don't think we sent money or checks. I went to the bank, but we sent a record of the income to J.W. Law in Dubuque by mail, and they did all the bookkeeping. And later he said, I think it might have been right after I left, I went back to college, he said, yeah, they told me one day I was close to being bankrupt because it's like a lot of businesses used to be. You had a shoebox record keeping. It's a little better, but it didn't give you any visibility of where you've been, who was most profit for you, and where things were going. Well, same thing happens to large companies. I mean, you name them. Boeing right now is going. Clinton Engines went through it. On a small scale, he said, that's okay. He said, I just went out and did a few more sales. I went out and collected a few unpaid bills. By the way, his pocket always had about, 6 or 8 of 3x5 cards, and on them were the names of his customers who had some unpaid balances yet. He kept them in his pocket because if he ran across them, he wasn't going to be bashful about kind of casually mentioning this. Oh, by the way, did that repair work out okay? I kind of appreciate it. Things are a little tight right now. And sometimes, right then on the spot, the guy, well, I can give you a check. So that was his bookkeeping system. But he cautioned me because eventually he would be out on calls. Yes, Carol was there. Here, my Aunt Carol, she was my foster mother. Put up with a teenager living in the basement, working, going to high school. She was a good mother, in fact, foster. So later she told my mom, said, yeah, I was a little concerned about a couple times she stayed out late at night. But she took care of the family, but she didn't get involved in the business. I mean, she just didn't really want to be burdened, I suppose, with technical things or any aspect of it. So when I was there alone, if someone came in that owed a bill and paid it, that was great. If they came in and wanted to buy something else, and I didn't ask them about their balance, that would have been a problem. So Harold said, if there's someone you know next door, and we had several customers, and they need something fixed, that's okay. And they said, they'll get it later. But if somebody comes in and you don't know them, you never saw them before, and they want to buy something, he said, be sure and get some cash. He said, if you get a check and it's not good, he said, well, we'll worry about that, but get a payment. I said, okay, I understand. So here's one time I was a 16-year-old kid. Now, by the time I was 17 or 18, then I was kind of responsible for, a little bit more. And a fellow came in, putting engines late Friday afternoon. He looked like he'd just been done with the foundry. I never knew. I didn't know who he was. And he was looking at me. He said, what's a new Magnavox Hi-Fi you got? I see there one just advertised. And I showed him, and my mind kept thinking, I don't know how this guy's going to make a payment. I didn't want to, be too frontal about it, but I just had a speech lined up. He said, I want that one. I wanted to ask him, well, then how would you like to pay for it? I didn't have to do any of that. He looked at 2 or 3 and said, I want that one. And he pulled out a wad of money, cash, and he peeled off. He says, can you make change for, I don't know, 20s, I guess? I said, yeah, I think so. So I was pretty relieved. Never judge a customer, potential or otherwise, by first appearance. I learned a lot of lessons, a farm kid coming in off the farm, as many others did at that time. Harold eventually decided, I guess sometime after I left, let me bring you up to speed on my 4 years that I was there. He was a patient guy. Somehow I got in the door. It was him or my father. But come the spring, it was in October, I just turned 16. Come spring of that year, next year, I was finishing my sophomore year in high school. Junior year, I guess it was, yeah. And I got an offer, and again, I don't know from my dad or from Arnold Stamp. My dad knew Arnold Stamp. They were both soil commissioners. How many remember the Stamp family? Oh, yeah. They had 5 farms out east here. They were pretty much all connected. I didn't know them, and nobody from connection. And one of them, Arnold talked to me, I need some help this summer. Would you like to come out? I'm already helping my uncle, and I'll be out of school full-time, summertime. And Harold said, oh, that's all right. If we'll get by. I don't know, maybe I had it cooked up with that. Anyway, it was my maybe Dad's last attempt to see if I really wanted to be a farmer. I don't know. I went to work for Arnold, lived out there. Marguerite, is that his wife, I think? She was another excellent cook. She used to have prize-winning stuff at the fair, I remember. And they had a little girl, just adopted. I remember that. But I lived there and worked there doing mostly crops and tractor and a little bit with the pigs and so on. But it was a get out of the TV business. Like, oh, okay, what did I go back to high school? I kind of talked to Dad, maybe I should just drop out of high school and go back into farming. I said, no. He said, you get into high school, and Uncle Harold will take you back. I said, okay. So I went back living in the basement, worked there until I got out of high school. Then buddies and I signed up for the Army, so I left again. Came back, active duty reserve 6 months later, and Harold said, well, you want to come back to work for me? Yeah, live in the basement. Then I thought, well, I better go to school in Chicago. I took some correspondence, but I said, I need some more. So I told Harold, I think I need to go to Chicago, just like he did. He took correspondence and he went to Chicago. So every time I came up with something that seemed like a hard decision for me, Uncle Harold had been there, done that, and made it work. And he understood young guys just don't know what they're going to do, don't know what they're qualified for. And just going off a fine 4-year piece of paper that says you're qualified is the preferred, accepted, normal way of doing that now. But many are finding that the paper they had didn't really do for them what they had hoped, and they found a new interest. Well, Harold's way of, or the way of doing that is always best if you can sample along the way. And so I went to school, came back again, and Harold said, well, you want to come back? By that time, I came back the day that my parents moved south of Maquoketa. So I didn't have a reason, they lived 8 miles out, but I didn't have a reason to live in the basement. And they just assumed I would live with parents out south of Maquoketa, right where the golf course is now. So that's what I did. I went back to work for Harold, and so I started and quit 3 times by that point. And I didn't think anything of that. I don't know how I can think right now and say how blessed I was to be able to try and come back and try again. But a long story short, after a while I was wanting a little different experience running my own business. In later years I decided, my personality has never been such that I should or could actually run my own business. I love the ideas. I've written some business plans. I've had about 6 or 7 part-time, some pretty full-time. But the full-time business that paid the bills was right ahead of my story here a little bit. But I wanted to get in the TV radio business, my own. There was a business for sale in Preston. Gearlock TV, I believe, was the name of it. I don't remember. But I had this crazy idea, and the whole idea collapsed within a week. I saw that great big station wagon up Modern Motors. Here's one. I went up and tried to talk about getting it, and John said, well, take it for the weekend. Well, yeah, tank of gas, go ahead. I got the insurance. But over the weekend, I said, this isn't going to work. I didn't have enough money to fill the gas tank. I mean, so, oh boy, glad I figured this out. I couldn't go in TV business if I wanted to. Oh, I could have. Dad would have co-signed. That wasn't making sense. And I went back on Monday morning, talked to John. Oh, I was thinking for the car, John, really great. But I tell you what, I can't afford it. I don't have any money. And by the way, it takes a lot of gas. And I talked for 5 minutes, and John kept coming up with ideas why I should buy that car. And 15 minutes later, I said, look, John, I got up to leave. I can't buy that car. I got to get back to work. John said, well, I thought I was going to get a lecture. I probably needed one. But John said, how would you like to come to work for me? Doing what? Well, selling farm equipment. Trucks, cars. I'll let you have a new red hardtop Ford demonstrator for your own car. Well, that clinches the deal. I said, well, okay. It worked for about a year, and then it didn't work. That's my attention span was 6 months. I normally give her a job 6 months, with one exception, but after a year, I just decided I gotta do something. I walked out the door, handed him my keys, and I said, consider this my resignation, John. It was a good experience. I don't think I made a dime for the guy, but he was patient. He didn't give me any lecture. He said, well, I was disappointed. I thought maybe I could get you plugged into this business. No, I said, John, it's been a good run. I had no idea. Walked out the front door, had no idea what I was going to do next. None. I did know they had some bills coming due and there was no unemployment, no severance. I thought, well, let's see I walked down and talked to Harold. I wasn't going to come back. I asked the 4th time and he didn't offer. He said, well, tell you what, why don't you go to Collins and see if you could get a job there. He said, they're a pretty good company. I know them from the Navy days. The pilots used to come in and they had a bunch of different equipment and different planes. And the pilots would always say that Collins equipment works the best of any of them and on the ships. So I said, well, I kind of had that in mind. I had a friend from school, Jack Dutton, that was a neighbor up in Iron Hill. He worked there. I talked to him and Jack said, yeah, it's a good company. So I went there and I took the test and I passed. I said, when can I start? They said, well, you could start Monday if you want to start in Anamosa. They had a plant there. Was Collins still the plant in Bellevue?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. Anyway, they had one, and I think Anamosa was the only one they had. It was where they did the amateur ham radios, basically, which would have fit because, we can tour it on the way home and let us know. I still hadn't moved on to Coconut. I toured the plant. It's the old shirt factory. If anybody know where that might be, it's the Community Arts Center now. Clunky looking old thing. And the equipment that I'd be working on was in the basement. And I mean, it was packed close. And no air conditioning. And I thought, this isn't quite what I want. I could put up with no air conditioning, but I told them Monday, I said, well, thanks, I could commute it from Macokota. That thought didn't even cross my mind. A farm kid, I wanted to get to the big city. I wanted to get to Cedar Rapids, I suppose. How soon could something open in Cedar Rapids? About 3 weeks. So went there, and 34 years later, I retired after what I consider far more opportunities by far than was ever deserved by my education. Practical experience, yes. I had a lot of things that worked in different fields. I had some customer communication experience. I was asked several times to take a position, which I never refused. Well, the first one was out of the blue, totally something different. I've been working in high-frequency communications. Came up 3 steps, and I was in the union, happy with what I was doing. Figured that was where I was going to keep going. And this offer came out of the blue, literally. And I called in the interview, and they offered me a position as a test foreman. Okay, foreman. All the supervisor positions were men. It's now called test supervisors. Okay. And he said, well, you would be leading a group of technicians testing our new business area. I said, what is that? There's some fancy stuff. Well, we're going into the computers. And I said, oh, I didn't want to give away too much of my ignorance. Never tell more than needed, because you might screw up the sale. I learned that. Don't worry about how the guy's going to pay. They're going to pay you to take this job. Oh, so I had that figured out. And I said, well, what would be the details? Well, you just supervise these technicians and trusting computers. It's pretty simple. It was simple circuits. I got a picture of the circuit board. They were about yay by yay, and most of them didn't have more than 20 parts, 25, maybe 5. It was all transistor. That was the first. I knew how to spell transistor. Uncle Harold called them trans resistors. But I knew the theory, and he said, we'll send you to school in California for 2 weeks, and we'll give you somebody to help. For the first 3 weeks, I swear I was drowning. I mean, I felt so incapable, incompetent, and unable. I tried not to let the world know that I had that feeling because it seemed like things were moving along. It was like you're in a current and you just keep doing what you had to do, kind of like what I learned up to that point. So again, I thank all the people along the way, Uncle Harold and John Wagner and Arnold Stamp and I don't know, neighbors. And I'm sure today each one of you got that same story. And don't be afraid to share it with your family. Get it in writing if possible, because there are messages there that will be quite helpful for young people that are struggling, trying to figure out what it is that I'm supposed to be doing. When I got into Collins, there were days when I felt there's got to be a better way to make it. They didn't last moments. I was in one point for quite a while. I told my bosses, look, I hate to tell you this, but I would come in here and work for nothing because I enjoy this challenge so much. I can't work for nothing, as you know. And to have the feeling where you want to get up in the morning and go in because it's exciting, challenging, rewarding, and it all fits. But I know so many people who never were able to achieve that. Now, I want to thank again my mentors along the way, especially Uncle Harold and Aunt Carol. A lot of memories that kind of fit together, but rather than try to dwell on what was, I think it's best just to leave those memories resonant. They either get worse or better for some people. Now, me, I try to leave the worst part of them out of the story because there's so much to be learned from helping another along the way today. Young people, I see the same floundering that I went through. Community colleges have set out a path that's intended to give you some of that experience, hands-on, nursing, body shops. My granddaughter, youngest one, just getting married here for too long, she got into woodworking in the wood shop. Did a beautiful wood project. I mean, oh my goodness. I thought, well, I tell you what, we have these stereotypes in my mind of what a person can do and what they can't do, and some of it falls across the boundaries of men or women. That boundary never did exist, and it doesn't and should not exist now. Women are serving in the military in all aspects. Men are in nursing and teaching and so on. So the idea of getting a job to gain some exposure and some learning, the first question should not be, what's the raise? You know, what are the benefits? I never asked those questions. Back in my mind was, oh my, after I took the job, they're not paying me enough for this heartburn. But that feeling went away, as I hope it does for people today. Well, I want to show a little bit here. I got some artifacts here, some tubes and some. And actually, when I started with Harold, I had never heard the word transistor, computer, binary logic, you know, laptop computers, and none of that. Over the time, this OLDL, you learn along the way, and over the years I've accumulated a lot of. We used to have probably 150 different cardboard boxes, all sizes, filled up with tubes. Neighbor Jay Franks, the back door neighbor, a carpenter, he made a nice big rack on the wall, we're standing, with movable dividers for all the tubes. Nowadays, you got those tubes, they're empty. You can buy tubes yet, you can still do vacuum tube projects, by the way. But what I've accomplished along the way is 99% God's gifts given through other people. And a little bit of initiative and curiosity. I'm kind of like Edison. I like to ask a lot of questions. I came close on one. They said, you should write that up for that. And I said, well, yeah, but it's not that practical, and everybody agreed. I've got some books I like to write. One of my latest, The Perilous Quest, Revive Iowa Nice. I'm into renovating rural Iowa communities right now. Pick yourself up a copy if you like. I'll give a little donation. Make Bonnie a salary back there. I tell you what, you folks in Jackson County are kind of my role model for how to coordinate and keep a historical society alive and vibrant and active. It's a lot of moving parts, and you seem to have a well-oiled machine. And the leadership is a big part of it. But if you have leaders, you have to have followers, and that's what I like to consider more important than the leader is a combination there. So take grace and thanks in the fact that your organization is providing a valuable service to this community. By the way, I want to mention, if you didn't get an email already, sign up. We've got a nonprofit seminar coming up, and talk to me about it. Free lunch in Monticello. You got to drive up there next week. Well, that's all for now. And if you want to hear more about Collins someday, maybe we can start with Bellevue operation and spool out from there.
Thank you.
It's been a run.